There's Michael right there.
Hey.
I thought I'd get us going. Hey, I jumped us in. We're live. So let's just do this. Say, this is Michael Uslan. You're watching the Break It Down show. Can you give me that intro?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
You say, hey, this is Michael Uslan, and I'm watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, sure. Hi, this is Michael Uslan. I'm watching the Break It Down show.
All right, hard you. I took a guess at Uslan. So Uslan. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, nobody ever gets it right in the beginning.
You've been doing so much media about your book, and I want everybody to go get that. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But the main thing is I want to say is thanks for coming on the show, man. You can do a lot of different things. You're obviously fantastically successful, but I in particular appreciate you coming on. It's really cool of you to do the show with me.
I love doing shows with people who know comics and movies, and we share a commonality of interests and passions. It really does make my day.
Oh, that's fantastic. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I agree, like these things make my day as well. I can exchanging conversation. And by the way, I don't know if anybody in the past has done so since we've had him on the show, but you are our first Oscar winner on the show. It was a box that I know I could check off at any time. I could invite someone, but I like to kind of let it happen naturally. So we've had Nobel Peace Prize winners, Pulitzer winners, Peabody winners, Emmy. People have won multiple Grammys in the same night, but we never really had an Oscar winner. So you've helped us complete our own Break It Down show, EGOT.
Well, who knows? Maybe by next year we can also get a Tony Award on this one.
Yeah. That's true, huh? Because you got your play going on. Let's start right there.
Yeah, I am so excited. I've been in this business just over 45 years. This coming May will be 50 years since I started working at DC Comics. So it's no secret I'm in the fourth quarter of my career. And at this stage of life, when so many people I know are retiring, to be pushed out of my comfort zone and be doing new and exciting things that I've never done before, completely different than movies and animation and comics and graphic novels. It's just so exciting to me. And the fact that the Nederlander Organization of New York, which owns like half the Broadway theaters, they've been around for a zillion years. They're fantastic people to work with, and I can lean on them as the experts in this area as we work to bring this great play based on my book, The Boy Who Loved Batman, based on my story, to Broadway. I mean, it is, God, I wish my parents were here.
In the olden times, you would have drank too much, had too many martinis, and you'd be gone 10 years ago, right? But it's, and I mean this in the best possible way, that's not true anymore. You're not ancient by any means, but you are well past what used to be a working age. And look at you. Yeah, you're going to Broadway. Like this is all different now.
It is really all different. And when COVID first started, like 2 years ago, I sat down with my kids who are both in this industry. And I said, look, the whole industry is in a panic right now. Everybody's saying this is a catastrophe. We have to look at it that it's an opportunity. And however long this is going to last, we have to make use of this time and prepare for whatever the new normal is going to be, because clearly normal will never be returning. So during that time, I wrote the sequel memoir to The Boy Who Loved Batman, Batman's Batman, which came out this week. I wrote the play, and I wrote a feature film screenplay based on the book as well, which we are moving ahead with now. We just signed my number one choice of director for, and we'll be announcing that once the Broadway play gets announced. But just really use that COVID time to push things forward and get ready in a position to make a lot of things happen.
Right. It's interesting when you get a lot of credit because you realize that Batman was a story that needed to be told and really brought the Batman thing in, but not just DC, but Marvel. I mean, this entire universe of, and how many dozens of comic book or graphic novel based movies have happened now because of your vision. I mean, you've completely redefined the entire industry.
Well, I can either take the blame or the credit.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
But I like to very specifically credit Tim Burton for paving the way for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this is my point of contention. we had to go out there and make the world's first ever revolutionary, dark and serious comic book superhero movie. And it was Tim who deserves the credit, because he came up with this genius idea that, and I call it the big idea, that if we're going to do this seriously and not get unintentional laughs from the audience, this movie has to be about Bruce Wayne, not Batman. And that was the big idea. That was the game changer right there. So if you look at Marvel, the Iron Man movies should truly be titled Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
The Spider-Man movie should really be titled Peter Parker. And that's all from the influence of Tim Burton in that first movie. The same way my dear friend, another genius, Anton Furst, who was our production designer and designed Gotham City, the Batmobile, the whole look of the picture. Anton's design work is still influencing every genre movie to this very day.
I don't want to go past Michael Keaton, because ultimately you guys decided to pick the guy who played Billy Blaze in Night Shift, right? I mean, maybe there was a movie in between those movies that really did something, but you know, recently before he does his movie, he plays this goofball guy working the night shift in a morgue. Who
Oh yeah,
to-
I was apoplectic when Tim said he wanted Michael Keaton to play Batman, Bruce Wayne, excuse me.
Right? Yeah.
They had to set up a screening of the rough cut of a movie, Clean and Sober, for me to see, to just calm me down. And I walked out of there. I said, I take it all back. He's not Mr. Mom. He's not just a comedian. He is a great, serious actor. I take it back. I said, but Tim, you know, he's like my height, and he doesn't have muscles, and he doesn't have a square jaw. And
Right.
Tim said, you know, Michael, moving from one medium to another, a square jaw does not a Batman make. If this is going to be about Bruce Wayne, he said, I can carve musculature into a costume. I can cheat height. But we have to show a Bruce Wayne so driven and obsessed to the point of being psychotic that audiences around the world who have never read a comic book will go, oh yeah, that's a guy who would get dressed up as a bat and go out and do this thing. And it was that suspension of disbelief that he nailed, with the corollary to his big idea being world building. From the opening frames, Gotham City had to be the third most important character in the whole movie, and audiences had to believe in Gotham City before they could possibly believe in a guy dressed as a bat.
This is not the universe I imagine that you thought of as a kid, though, as you're falling in love with these comics, because it's completely different from that mid-century forward for a long time. This is a different world that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's a different world, but you have to understand that I was one of the early members of comic book fandom as it was really getting organized and building out. I was at the first comic book conventions ever held on the planet Earth. I would beg my mom on any Tuesday we had off from school to take me to DC Comics for the Tuesday afternoon tours. I met Stan Lee when I was 11 years old. And I used to go around. I was a reporter for the early fanzines at age 13 and 14. And my parents would drive me around on Sundays and we would go to the homes of the creators, the writers, the artists, the editors. And I would meet them and individually I would interview them and hear the stories straight from the horse's mouth, how the industry was formed, how DC and Timely Comics were created, how the superheroes were created. I mean, I am possibly one of only two people left standing who met Bill Finger. And when I was 13 years old, Bill Finger told me in a sketchy bar in a rundown sleazeball hotel in New York City, told me the story of how Batman was created. I mean, and that's why, if you've seen any pictures from this past week's premiere of the Batman, I'm there with a button that says "Thank you, Bill Finger,"
Yeah.
and it belongs over my heart.
Yeah, I'm letting that sit for a second, because you're right. He changes the world. You know, I mean, much like you have, and the good and the bad, right, with all of the comic book things. But this, what was different about what you did? Look, I remember the Superman movies, you know, from the late 70s, early 80s, you know, Richard Pryor and all that stuff, and it got bad really fast, you know, and a version of Superman, but I don't know they've really ever nailed Superman cinematically in the way that the comic books did, right? Howard the Duck, oh my gosh, why do we even bother? You know, and we had all these great X-Men I mean, even then in the 80s, the X-Men were around, but something about what you did with Batman and Tim Burton, of course. Why Batman though? Like what was it about that character when there's a whole universe of universes?
It's pretty simple. I fell in love with Batman when I was about 7, having been more comfortable in prior years with Superman, who was lighter, brighter, and on TV. So it wasn't until I was a much more sophisticated, mature 7 that I gravitated to Batman. And it was simple, and it comes down to these basic things. Number one, first and foremost, he's human. Unlike Superman or the Hulk, I could identify with him, and I did identify with him. Batman comics, along with Superman comics and Spider-Man, truly impacted my own personal moral code of ethics as I was growing up. And they had a huge impact on me. But because Batman was human and his greatest superpower was his humanity, I always could project myself onto him. And I think people around the world have done that in different cultures, different politics, different philosophies. He can be yours. And that's why there's so many vastly different iterations of Batman, because the one true Batman is the one each and every one of us was first introduced to, whatever that age was, whether it was a comic book, a cartoon, a movie, a video game. That is our personal one true Batman. So there's room for everybody's version now. And I think that's important. Number two is Stan Lee once told me his theory of supervillains. He said, Michael, the greatest and most long-lasting superheroes are the ones who have had the greatest supervillains, because ultimately it's the supervillains who define the superheroes. And I believe that. Batman had the greatest rogues gallery in history and the greatest individual villain ever created, period. It was the primal origin story. That origin story transcends cultures as well as borders. When I was 7, 8 years old, I never thought about my parents dying until I read that in Batman comics. And my God, did that have an impact on me. And lastly, it's the car. It's the car,
Yeah.
you know. And that's why I fell in love with Batman. And that's why he works on so many levels for so many people, generation after generation.
The original Batman TV series with Adam West, you know, it was it's campy, and it's almost the definition of campy, but it worked. And it's completely different than Tim Burton's Batman. Can you at all help me make sense? I mean, because you get this in some way, so help me understand why it works.
All right. You have to understand my relationship to that series.
Okay.
There would be no Batman movie franchise had it not been for that series. In a cold night in January 1966, I'd been waiting for months for it to come on the air. Understand context of the times. Television was a barren wasteland when it came to comic book superheroes. We had Superman, and we had like one season in black and white of Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. And that was about it. And now Batman's coming, and I turn it on, and it's in color. And the sets are extravagant, and the opening animation looks like Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson artwork, and the car is cool. But 20 minutes in, I go, oh my God, this is a comedy. They are making fun of Batman. Batman is a joke. People around the world are laughing at Batman, and that killed me as a fanboy, because I knew he was created in 1939 by Bill and Bob as a creature of the night, stalking demented villains. And so I made a vow that night at the end of that first show. I was downstairs in our basement den. I made a vow like young Bruce Wayne once made a vow, except his was made over the bloody bodies of his parents, and mine were safe upstairs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But I said, somehow, some way, I'm going to show the world a true Batman, the dark and serious Batman. And I am going to attempt to erase from the collective consciousness of the world culture these 3 new words, pow, zap, and wham. So it was negative reinforcement to me. It was negative reinforcement to me. I vowed to, that was the only iteration of Batman the whole world knew at that time. That's what was so wrong about it. Now I embrace it, because we have so many interpretations of Batman out there, from movies and video games to animation and TV and comic books. I welcome it, because that old TV show, just like the animated Batman meets Scooby-Doo movie, they become entry points for young kids into the world of Batman and Gotham City. And then the kids can grow into the movies and the cartoons and the video games.
Yeah.
So now there's room for it. One of the reasons I embraced the Lego movie so much and Lego Batman is because it was really clever writing. We weren't laughing at Batman, we were laughing with Batman. There's a hidden gem called Teen Titans Go to the Movies. It's one of the funniest movies you want to see as a fanboy because it's written purely on two levels, one for my grandkids and one for those of us who are really into the whole thing. And plus it has Stan Lee's only cameo in a DC Comics movie. So today I do embrace that show.
It's well, and it's important. I mean, you think about how silly and ridiculous that whole show was. And back then they made a lot more shows per season, but it wasn't around very long. But Eartha Kitt, Cesar Romero, I mean, Burgess Meredith, over all these incredible people, and we love them for being in that ridiculous, goofy show, right?
Never forgave Cesar Romero for not shaving the mustache. I met Cesar Romero at the premiere of our 1989 Batman movie.
Yeah.
And he was this elegant guy. He's from my hometown. He's from Asbury Park, New Jersey. And I said to him, so tell me about the mustache thing with Joker. And he said, there was no great overriding mythology to the characters back then. It was just a character from a comic book. And he didn't have really any clue as to how important the whole thing was to a lot of young people. And I think possibly, you know, if it had been done later on, he might have had a very, very different outlook on it.
Yeah, I just named a couple of people from that series, but it is loaded full of people that either had been something incredible and still said yes to it, and a bunch of people that were going to continue to do incredible things. It really is a remarkable success when you think about what was on TV back then, and the fact that you can still turn on a channel somewhere, it's playing somewhere right now.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Look, Cliff Robertson was a good friend of mine.
Okay.
And I remember the first time we got together, I said, Cliff, I want to talk about Charlie. I want to talk about 3 Days of the Condor. I want to talk about PT 109. He says, no way, we're talking Batman. And that's all he wanted to talk about. And he loved doing that. He loved doing the fact that he wanted to talk about that before 3 Days of the Condor. I mean, my God, still maybe the best thriller ever made. But yeah, it meant a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah, it did, and apparently inspired you to do something about it. And again, you changed the entire movie cinemascape. When you talk about the good and the bad, I mean, let's get into a little bit about that. What are some of the not regrets, but your things like, man, this has kind of gotten out of hand, or you know, I mean, I know for me, I don't watch very many graphic novel themed shows anymore because I've kind of overdosed on those things. But what are your things where like this could have been better, or I wish there was less of this? What are some of those mistakes?
Well, so generally in the motion picture industry, not talking about Batman right now,
Right.
what used to be movie studios have become big conglomerates, and they own a lot of different things. They own theme parks. They could own a t-shirt company, part of a toy company, a lot of wheels to be greased. Sometimes at these conglomerates, executives get very enamored with toys and games and Happy Meals. And when they become so enamored with them that they dictate to filmmakers that they need to make movies that are light, bright, kiddie friendly, and family friendly. And to appease the toy companies, there should be 3 heroes in a movie, 3 villains in a movie, each one with 2 costume changes and 2 vehicles. My contention then is that the tail has begun wagging the dog. And this is not a good thing because something's got to go when you do that. And it's typically story and character. And why not instead bring in filmmakers who have a knowledge of a character and a love for a character and a vision for a character, and you believe could execute a vision? If you just allow them to make great movies, you'll sell toys anyway. So I was thrilled when new management came in and they reached out to me and said, okay, we're going to jumpstart the Batman franchise again, and we're going to do it. We are going to do it in a dark and serious way. So that to me was great because I was not personally happy about either Batman and Robin or Catwoman. Now, let me say categorically, Joel Schumacher was one of the nicest people I have ever met in my life. He was an extremely talented gentleman, extremely talented, and he was doing what he was asked to do. And he gets a lot of heat that he does not deserve. Um, but let's just say that those kind of movies ultimately got us to Christopher Nolan, who came in to restore the darkness and dignity to Batman. So it was worth everything we went through at whatever downtimes there were in order to get to people like Christopher Nolan and Todd Phillips and Matt Reeves.
Since we're talking about some of the people that come along to the character along the way, I recently watched that Val Kilmer documentary about his life, and he talks about how the suit was more important than him, and he didn't want to be the suit, and he couldn't act in it because he was too stiff, and it was about the villains. Is that? And then we got the version with all of the bad characters, and Arnold was there and everything else. It didn't. There was a stretch there where it was too much. It kind of lost the well, it didn't kind of it did. It lost the essence of who Batman was.
Look at Batman the Animated Series for a minute.
Okay.
Look at what they accomplished in my favorite episodes, which were the stories of Mr. Freeze and his wife. There are great human stories to be told there, obviously. Look at what they did with Mask of the Phantasm, which I contend to this day is one of the best Batman stories ever told in any media. And they don't get enough spotlight. People over there, from Sam Register, Bruce Timm, Eric Radomski, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, Andrea Romano, Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill. These folks deserve so much credit for advancing the Batman over the years. And I love to see them get their due.
Yeah. Gosh, who don't you know? How about Frank Miller? Let's talk about Frank Miller for a minute.
Yeah. Frank revolutionized comic books.
Well, he did.
That 1986, between The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, turned the world on its head and was a shout out to the entire non-comic book reading world. Hey, these things are here. They're no longer just for kids.
Yeah.
They are no longer simply about traditional superhero tropes. They are deconstructions of the superhero. And I mean, if you turn on any streaming channel, what you're basically getting is one or other future iteration of either Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns in some way, shape, or form. And you're getting a lot of it. Frank turned the world on its head and deserves all the accolades and recognition for having accomplished that. For us, what it meant was not an impact on the movie itself in 1989 when it came out, or 88 when it was made. But what it did for us was it did let the world know that you could do darker, more serious comic books, and there was an audience worldwide for this kind of a thing. So if anything, it really, really helped in terms of the marketing of the movie and getting it out to an audience. I think that was really important.
I think Frank Miller was the guy that really. I wasn't into comic books. I wasn't out of comic books out there. My friends wanted to go. We'd go to the store, and what a big deal this was as a kid. Like, hey, my dad's going to drive us down across town to this comic book store. And you're like, I'll go. And my mom would give me a couple of bucks, and I would buy a Peter Porker, or, because I like things that were a little more ridiculous. I think I bought a screenplay to Creep Show. That was a comic book,
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was sort of like my zone where I didn't.
Howard the Duck.
Absolutely. I bought a Howard the Duck comic. I probably have it in my mom's garage somewhere, right? It's in a plastic bag somewhere. Didn't stick with me, I like the Flash. I like the Justice League cartoons in the morning on Saturday. But when Frank Miller allowed me to see these characters in a different way, I went in for a fairly extended, long, deep dive into that part of the world and really started to enjoy that. And then I love seeing the success he got from that, the 300 and Sin City and all these things. It does seem to me, though, all things considered and everything, He has sort of been left behind by this movie industry and all the things they've created. Look, like the guy's got a zillion movies made, but it doesn't seem like he's at the zenith like it feels like he should be.
Well, you're also talking about stages of life too. I
Mhm.
mean, if Frank was 30 or 40, and at the heart of it, it's what I face every day.
Right.
I'm the old fart in the room. It's been many years since I have been in a meeting where I wasn't the oldest person in the room in this industry. And it's something you gotta deal with and combat. When I think about my graduating class, all the people I started with in the industry over a 5-year period, let's say,
Yeah.
man, there's probably not more than a couple dozen still standing.
Mhm.
This industry it can be hard on people. And let me tell you, as something that proclaims it to be the most liberal of all industries,
Oh boy. Yeah. That's it.
the ageism that runs rampant here is pretty damn strong. And for years it was focused on actresses, and the old saying, "Oh, once they hit 40, they were toast in this business."
Yeah.
Um, and once guys hit maybe, I don't know, 50, they largely were done in this business. Hopefully, it's all changing. But in terms of ageism, it still has quite a way to go. Um, I saw Frank recently, and the man is a vital artist and creator. And I think age has really nothing to do with it.
Mhm.
I have nothing but the most tremendous respect for him and his career.
Yeah, same. He's an important, like I said, artist, and I just wish that they would allow him more things, and not just like the 301, or the 302, those kind of like let him deconstruct some of these people that need deconstructing, and just he's such a powerful tool. Okay, I want to go back to the boy who loved Batman, and going to look, it's such a different thing, right, to take this to the stage. I mean, and ultimately, not really, but really it is because we think about from a comic book to the stage, that's quite a gap in the arts. So were you comfortable with this? Was this your idea? Did someone have to convince you? What was the moment when you're like, yeah, this is going to happen. I'm going to put effort into this because you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but you did want to do this.
I did very much. And let me assuage all my fellow fans out there, plus anyone who had to bear witness at Spider Man the musical. Um, this is not about Batman singing and dancing. That is not what this show is. So let me reassure you. This is a movie based on my story, The Boy Who Loved Batman, of how a blue collar kid from New Jersey who had no money. Um, I didn't know anyone in Hollywood. I had no relatives in Hollywood. All I had were big dreams and a willingness to get up off the damn couch to try to make something happen, to find a door open, the sliver I could shove my foot in, um, to knock on doors. I learned, man, I learned when I got out of college that doors absolutely are going to slam in your face. It's a guarantee. But what I learned was when they do slam, you only have two choices. You either go home and cry about it, or you dust yourself off, pick yourself up, and go back and knock again and knock again and knock again. The Batman movie franchise was built on my bloody knuckles. And when through a mutual friend, David Baxter, God bless you, David, introduced me to Bob Nederlander of the Nederlander Organization in New York. And between the Nederlander and the Schuberts, that defines Broadway and has for the last 100+ years. They said to me, we've got this thing that's happening now, this pandemic. And we understand that when it's over, there's not going to be a return to normalcy for Broadway. There is going to have to be a new normal. And nobody quite knows what that is, but we do know that what we want are more intimate plays that are wildly entertaining, but at the same time, thematically are about people who dream big and who persevere through the hardest days and the longest hours and everything going against them and show the people there's hope for all of us yet in this world to make our dreams come true. He said, that's the kind of story we want. It's got to be uplifting. And they said they read my book, The Boy Who Loved Batman, and they since read the sequel memoir that just came out, Batman's Batman. And they said, this is the stuff of Broadway post-COVID. And I couldn't be more thrilled. They've been terrific to work with. I am out of my comfort zone. I am learning new things. I am relying on their expertise. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful age of exploration for me. And the pieces are falling together quickly, and we are fast-tracked. And I think we're going to be on Broadway fairly soon. And but it's a great process.
It sure is. And I have a lot of questions about this because, okay, so one, I love musicals. I love stage plays. I go to them as often as I am able. And one of the things I know is when people, and I'm not saying anything bad about Hamilton, when people laud Hamilton for being incredible, and I'm like, you've not seen anything. Like if you go, I saw Come From Away, which I don't know if you've seen it. And if you're like me and I was going to do a Broadway show, I'd be there at Broadway stealing and copying, inspiring all kinds of things, to develop my show. Come From Away, just for the audience, has, I think, 12 chairs, and everybody plays 3 or 4 roles individually. And it's just a masterwork. And there's barely a prop out there. It's just people acting. They're different people all the time. And you end up crying at the end of it. It is it's exactly the greatness of what Broadway is.
I think that's true. If you were to ask me, for example, Casablanca aside, okay, that's my favorite movie of all time. But if you were to ask me, what is your favorite film drama? It's 12 Angry Men by Sidney Lumet. The whole thing takes place in one room, and it is electrifying. You never forget it. It stays with you for the rest of your life. And nobody captures that essence better than Broadway. And that's the kind of thing you love to see.
Yeah, the jurors have numbers, not names, and it's just it's such a masterwork. So when you did go to Broadway to kind of tune up what you were going to do with this thing, what did you see? What inspired you? What did you keep? What did you throw out?
Well, it's an ongoing process, first of all. Definitely an ongoing process. I think that for me, it was about the most important stuff is the stuff of younger Michael's life and how we get to where we go in life and who our real life superheroes are and who our real life supervillains are and how that all comes into play to make us who we are as adults. And, my parents, the women in my life, let's start with that. My mom, my 7th and 8th grade English teachers, my wife, these are the women that propelled me through life and supported me and kicked me in the butt when I needed kicking, but held me back from the precipice when I was in the midst of falling. And I think it's a real testament to female empowerment, even though this is about me. Number 2, the mentors of my life. My father-in-law, Stan Lee, Saul Harrison at DC Comics. There have been people who have been critical to my life. And then, of course, there was the rabbi who married me and my wife, who looked at me as I was standing under the chuppah with my wife in our marriage ceremony in the temple and looked at me with disdain and said, "And you, Michael, you read comic books and collect comic books. You write comic books and you teach comic books. But let me advise you, Michael, life is not a comic book." And it was like, I'm getting yelled at during my wedding ceremony for being a comic book geek. And I couldn't believe what was happening. But that was part of the negative reinforcement in life. And to tell you the truth, when we had our opening of our first Batman movie in 1989, after 10 years of that human endurance contest to get it made, I had a chance for a few minutes to talk to the SRO crowd in the theater in New York where we had it, our screening. And I said, Rabbi, wherever you are, life is a comic book, and I have lived it. And it really is true. So this play is about those jokers and two-faces and people who try to stop you, who try to say no, who try to hold you back, but then the victory of those who said yes and supported you and propelled you forward. I kind
Yeah.
of describe it as it's a Christmas story for people who grew up reading comic books. I just lost your audio.
That was me because I got an airplane flying into John Wayne
Okay.
overhead. Yeah, the rabbi character you just talked about, that is almost a trope from the 20th century where the world started to open up. You didn't have to just be a lawyer or a farmer or a whatever. You could be someone who made your entire career with comics. And even if you didn't invent this entire new ex- gigantic exploding genre of films, you were doing it. And it's great to see that perseverance thing. Like Sandy Koufax, like, I'm not here to deal with, I'm just striking people out. And they're like, would you please, just for the rest of us, observe some of the holiday? All right, but we're removed from a lot of that now, right? Like, we're unencumbered in the same way Catholics don't have to just eat fish on Friday, we've gotten away from those things. But is this a good thing or a bad thing, do you think? Is this an evolution towards being a better humanity? I mean, obviously women are a lot more empowered now than they were 100 years ago. My goodness, but
Well,
we're also a lot more divisive now than we've probably ever been.
yeah, well, let me set the stage for the question: how does a kid in his 20s, which is what I was, buy the rights to Batman from DC Comics? How the hell does that happen? It can't. It's impossible. But in the context of its times, and this is on your point, the people I had been pitching to at the studios and Warner Communications DC itself at that time were largely consisted of a lot of adults who grew up in the era of Seduction of the Innocent and Dr. Frederick Wortham, who were blaming comic books for this being the sole cause of the post-World War II rise of juvenile delinquency in America. And people looked down their noses at comic books and denigrated the creators and people who worked in the industry. That was the atmosphere. So when I go in and say, I want to buy the rights to Batman, or then I came back a couple of weeks later and said, now I want to buy the rights to Swamp Thing. And the reaction was, Swamp Thing? DC makes something with a stupid title like Swamp Thing? And I said, that's worthless. I said, you're right, it's worthless. So give it to me for free. And I got it for free. And that's a whole other story. But that was the era. That was the era when Marvel couldn't do anything in the world of cinema. And it was at a point where whoever walked in the door with the most option money down on the table could walk away with rights because nobody put any value on it. I was told point blank that the reason Warner Communications bought DC was to get their hands on Superman because nothing else had value. And that was the day and age. And you have to understand that. And that's why I got turned down by every studio in Hollywood, because those executives look down their noses at comics, only put value on Superman. And to come back with Batman and say, you want to make a movie based on an old TV series? Nobody's ever done that.
Yeah.
You can't make serious comic book movies. Dick Donner, God bless him, he's one of my heroes and was one of the greatest people you'd ever want to meet. And Dick was the trailblazer with Superman. If you look at Superman 1, the Krypton sequence was done very seriously. The Smallville sequence was done very seriously. But man, the second he's in Metropolis and has the costume on, it takes a whole different lighter tone. And he's rescuing kitties from trees and, all of the stuff. It was up to Tim Burton and our Batman 89 to take the real plunge in all seriousness and darkness and do this thing. and finally proved that there was a market for it, that there was a respectability that people had for these characters. And no kidding, Jack Nicholson gave us a lot of the respectability that we needed for that movie. He absolutely did. But everybody from Michael Keaton to Kim Basinger, Robert Wool, Jack Palance, what an amazing, amazing crew. Michael Goff. I hate to leave anybody out.
Yeah.
But that was history, and that opened the door for everything that was to come since then.
And I meant to say this earlier, Clean and Sober, hell of a movie. I used to work at Tower Video, and when that movie came out, I watched it probably 10 times, and back when Tower was a culturally important thing, and you work at the video store, you were responsible for, I had more influence in Siskel and or Ebert, like you're the Tower Video guy. You had to know these things, and that was a hell of a movie. Another thing you talked about was Swamp Thing. I was born in '70, so I'm 12 when Swamp Thing comes out. And I knew that Wes Craven made movies that I normally wasn't allowed to see. And that Adrienne Barbeau was on the cover of it. And then it turned out there was a nice little, kind of frontal nudity scene. I was like, oh my God, this is the best movie of all time. I bought a Swamp Thing comic because I was I'm like, I got to have more. And it was a totally different thing because Adrienne Barbeau wasn't in the book. But oh my God, that absolutely had an impact on my life. That movie that was, the rights were given to you for free. I love that story. That's fantastic.
First of all, the movie, we had a hard $1.9 million to make that movie. And it was the first time I was ever producing. Had I known anything about producing, I would have known it should have taken 19 million to do that. God bless Wes Craven, a dear friend of mine, one of the nicest, most creative people I have ever met in my entire life. And we filmed it, again, being a first-time producer, we found the roughest, toughest swamps in South Carolina, and we filmed on location. And everybody had to wear snake boots. 2 guys had guns on the set. We had paramedics on the set because there were cottonmouths, copperheads, rattlesnakes, and coral snakes. And at the time, there was no cure for the poison of a coral snake.
Yeah.
Luckily, around the 1st of June, all the snakes were scared off by the alligators when the alligators came out.
Oh,
so you can imagine the conditions working on that. But and there was no computer anything. No computer anything. It all had to be done the good old-fashioned cinema way. So we said, okay, we're going to make a 1950s rubber-suited monster movie for kids that they can cheer for the hero, they can boo at the villain, and they can go for popcorn when there's a kissing scene. And that was kind of what we set out to do. And the most incredible part of that, if I could take just a few seconds, Tony Caesar, he was our fire gag stuntman, and he and his partner invented a gel. And for the first time, they could do a fire burn without an asbestos suit. And he put this gel all over his body, and then you put the fluid on top of it and light it, and Tony had approximately 60 seconds to do his fire burn before it burned through the gel onto his skin. So we had one time to do this, one take only. We were blowing up our major set. It was the middle of the night in the real swamp. I forgot to tell you, Tony had to do this entire stunt blind. He had to close his eyes and gel his eyelids in order to do it. And when Wes Craven said action, they set him on fire. He has to climb upstairs, and he slips, go down a hallway, burst through some doors, crash through a balcony railing, fall to the ground, and hope he gets up facing the exact right direction, run 20 yards onto a small, narrow wooden dock, and then jump into the actual swamp at the end, where the swamp would put the fire out in the nick of time. My God, it was one of the most exciting, pulse-pounding moments of my life. And that is, to this day, considered one of the greatest fire gag scenes in cinema. And that's all Tony Caesar, one take, and the magic of Wes Craven.
I was hoping we were going to talk about Adrienne Barbeau's boobs, but you know what? That story was better.
Let me tell you, Adrienne Barbeau is one of the nicest, most talented actresses in the business. Yeah. She did virtually all her own stunts. That was her getting into the muck of the swamps and running and jumping and doing all these things.
Yeah,
What we asked Adrian to do, she just did it. She was an amazing trooper. And she came back and later did the voice of Catwoman on Batman cartoons.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I don't in any way mean to denigrate. You just have to understand. I'm talking to everybody. You know, I was 12. I was 12. And in that era of movies, like, it really shapes who you are. I was telling a friend of mine, and I put it on Facebook. If I break into CB talk, all of my friends from that era, you know, we will all be able to talk and we'll enjoy it. And we have memories of, you know, Convoy and look, Burt Reynolds. He's my, you know, I watched Hooper. These are all these movies within a few years of each other that really kind of define this thing that we're talking about here.
Secret. When I was a lawyer at United Artists in my early days, one of the pictures I was in charge of the legal business affairs of was Convoy.
Oh, no kidding. Well, thank you. We loved those things. We had Allie Willis on the show at one point. She's written, I mean, as many successful. You can't be a more successful songwriter. She wrote the theme, The Friends.
I knew Allie. I was at her house. Did you ever go to her house?
Oh yeah, we recorded at her house. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. And I love how, like, you know, CBS had her on a contract for 2 more songs, and then the New Romantics were like on a contract, and they're like, well, you guys are both in town, just make this song happen, and it's like one of the most successful songs she ever writes, right? But she said when she went to Broadway, it was tough because the rhyming sequences, you can't use near rhymes in Broadway. You have to be more precise. And she's like, I really had to learn this new art form. You think, oh, she could write any song at all, and she can, but it's a different form completely. And I was shocked by that. So when you're looking at translating all the things that you know, how is Broadway different than what you are comfortable with? Because you said you're out of your zone. Tell me what that is.
Well, when I had to do a first draft script of the play, and you know, we had to get it ready to perform for potential investors. And we did 2 in New York City in Times Square. We did 1 at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, which was great. I'm used to a movie script. So a movie script is approximately 120 pages. You know, it's like a minute a page is kind of what we say on average. So first script I'm writing during the pandemic, have a lot to say. The material, I'm at like 165 pages. And I realized I got to cut 45 pages out of this before I even show it to anybody.
Right.
So I cut it down to 120. And they say, you know, Michael, Broadway's a little bit different. There's going to be music cues here, and there's going to be this and this. So you might want to cut it down further. Like I said, like to what? I said, like, how about 90 pages? I said, all right. So I cut 30 pages out of it. And I now have a 90-page script. They said, here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to recite this movie out loud. And we want you to time it and let us know what your timing is for this. And I came back and it was like ridiculous. It was so long.
Yeah.
I had to turn in ultimately a 60-page script.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, can you imagine having to cut out 105 pages of what you originally put down on paper? You better understand what the essence of your story is and what your through line is. And because everything that isn't essential has got to go. And that was a huge challenge and a huge eye opener. And thank God I had, you know, all the expertise of these great people who really understood my story and understood what it was like to have this kind of passion.
And you're good at this. I mean, this is the other thing, right? Like you know how to write these things. And you're right. When you go see a musical, or how about an opera where they say the same phrase 25 times, you know, and you're like, oh my God, you know, like I get it. And then they call back to it later on because there's a coda, and they go right back because it's important that you remember that. You're like, oh my God, you're right. It's a lot less words when you see something live on stage.
It really is. In terms of writing style, you know, with my 2 memoirs, for example, I try to write the way I speak. I want people who read my books to say, oh my God, Michael, this was like having a long lunch with you. Yeah. It's exactly what it's like when we sit around and talk. And that was my goal. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. So I feel pretty good.
So you've got the stage play, you've got the new book. It's called Batman's Batman, a memoir from Hollywood land of bilk and money. Uh, what is next? I mean, obviously you're going to keep doing things. You're going to continue to work these projects that you're doing, but you must have your hands on something already that you're looking to create.
Yeah, we do. You know, in my lifetime, a good producer was somebody who was akin to Johnny Appleseed.
Mm.
You've got to have IP and you've got to have creative ideas that you can throw out on the wall to see what sticks. Because, in all honesty, much of what you do will wilt on the vine ultimately. And it might not wilt until 10 years in, and all of a sudden it disappears. I still have pains from that. I talk about a lot of that pain and suffering in Batman's Batman, all the projects that missed,
Yeah.
that could have been, from a Green Lantern movie to a Shadow movie, Doc Savage, Lone Ranger. Oh my God, the list just goes on and on and on. Mr. Potato Head in live action.
Yeah.
So, you know, in order to endure, you've got to have enough properties going on. So we always do. We always have a certain amount. I'm thrilled that my son David is now my producing partner. And we have, pre-COVID, we were traveling the world together. We were in China and Thailand and Japan and South Korea and just all over. Thrilled. My daughter has her, she's a makeup artist, well-known makeup artist in Hollywood. She has top clients like Olivia Colman, or Best Actress, and she started her own company and line of skincare products called Lula, Lula. That's her Batman that she's been pursuing her whole life. So coming up, we have 4 streaming series that we're working on, 2 that we are just now negotiating the deals for. We have put together an absolutely dream group of people, from Academy Award-winning directors to top award-winning writers to amazing actors who you all will know instantaneously. They are of legendary status. We've got some amazing producing partners on these things. Everyone's name you will know instantaneously. But we're still a couple of months away from the announcements. But we're very, very excited about it. I think we'll have 3 of the 4 up and running before the year is out, and the 4th one's going to take a little bit longer because it's a little bit more challenging on the packaging side.
You know, we had and he's become a bit of a friend. Is Jeffrey Reddick, who invented the whole Final Destination series.
Mm-hmm.
And his story is remarkable. He's like, "Hey, I'm just going to write you a script," and some lady's like, "Yeah, you're adorable, honey. You're 13. We don't take unsolicited scripts." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't care about that," you know. And the next thing you know, he's working as a teenager for New Line, you know. So he has this impossible story. But one of the things he, I think, continues to fight is, you know, give me the next Final Destination, and not necessarily the next, like, number 7 or whatever it is that they're on, but that's what they want. They want him to do the same thing over and over again. How did you get out of that and be able to say, this has nothing to do with that, even if it's in the same genre and comic books, that kind of thing? But how did you break through to be able to have the ability, the agency to show up and pitch something that wasn't the next Batman?
Well, first of all, I realized when Batman came out in '89, I couldn't then go back and do some cookie cutter comic book superhero movies, that I couldn't follow Batman with something like that. So I had to find material that was super special, which is why I turned my attention to Constantine, because that was different and that was challenging. You know, you walk in to pitch the Hulk, you show a comic book. Oh, guy gets mad, guy gets green, guy, I get it. I could come in with 120 issues of Constantine and nobody would be able to just dope it out. So it's, how do you crack something like that and make it work? And for me, it started, I came up with my my tagline, and it was, "Welcome to the world of John Constantine, the James Dean of the occult world." And that got me in the door. But that's the kind of material I was always looking for, which is why I gravitated, as you read in my book, to bringing Monopoly to the movies in a linear fashion, to bringing Mr. Potato Head in live action, and doing just totally out of the box kind of stuff. And that was always important to me. Also important to me was to work on things that I'm passionate about. Well, one of the things is history. I'm a history major. I'm a history buff. So I latched on to Three Sovereigns for Sarah, which was the true story of the Salem witch trials of 1692. And the edict was, this has to be 100% historically accurate. That governs everything. And we had the leading historians in the world on the Salem witch trials, gave them power over our director. They could stop a scene from being shot if somebody's makeup or hair or prop or something wasn't exactly right. And then that attracted Vanessa Redgrave, one of my great heroes, Patrick McGowan. The Prisoner remains one of my greatest television series of all time. So to work with Patrick was a thrill. And that was great, using my history degree to do something. When I brought Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego to television, and then we worked on doing it as a live action feature film. That was another passion, because my son had been learning geography and research and reading maps through this computer game at school. And I wanted to do something educational but entertaining, which the TV networks really didn't want to hear from me, that I had something educational. They held up crucifixes when I walked into the room. So that was a challenge. It took a few years for us to get Carmen Sandiego on TV, but once we did, it was a rating smash. It was embraced by everyone, and we won the Emmy Award for it. So a lot of adventures like that, but that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, and a hell of a show. I mean, Lynn Thigpen was fantastic in that. I love the singers. You know, they would sing about, you know, whatever the artifact was or whatever it was that they were working on. And if I had been a little kid, by then I'm 21, I still watched that thing if it was on TV, because it was cool. I liked it. It was something. I mean, I knew I was watching a younger thing, but it just, you know, it really worked. I don't have you for much longer, but just everybody should get Michael's book, Batman's Batman, a memoir from Hollywood, the land of milk and honey. And also don't forget, and here's the link for that on the screen, The Boy Who Loved Batman. When it comes to stage, you definitely should go see that. Go see anything. Go watch Swamp Thing. I mean, you do such incredible things. When you look around, there must be times when you just go, "Oh my God!" I mean, look, Vanessa Redgrave, Wes Craven. These are some of the most successful storytellers that have ever lived in a land full of successful story. You must just every now and then just go, "I can't believe I get to do this." I mean, even to this day, it must happen to you.
You know, the other night we had the premiere of the Batman at Lincoln Center, and I told my wife, I feel like I'm walking through my dream.
Yeah.
It's very ethereal. It is, there are moments when I am virtually overcome that my parents aren't here for some of this, but they were there. They knew it happened. They were there for the first one, and my dad was around for a few of them, which was great. But it's just, I've had this 10-year human endurance contest with Batman, and I feel like I've been able to take all the negativity and all the trial and tribulation and turn it around, and I'm using it now through the books, through the way I go back every year and teach 2 classes at Indiana University Media School to inspire young people, to make them realize you can, and I'm not talking about movies or comic books, anything. You can make your dreams come true if you're willing to get up off the couch, find your passion, knock on doors till your knuckles bleed, have a high threshold for frustration. You can make your dreams come true. I'm living proof of it. And to use that in that way, to me, kind of validates my life's journey. When I started out with Batman, I thought this could become my career. I did not ever think it would become my life, and it has. And I embrace it, and I try to use it in many different ways to be something that other people can find inspiration in.
That's great. Let me close the show out. Hang in there for 1 minute. I'll be right back to you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you